subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Welcome to the Print soft cover. Today we have with us two people. One is Jahnavi Misra, who is a writer. She's a researcher. She's also a filmmaker. And we have with us Mr. Anup Surendranath, who is the Executive Director of Project 39A from Delhi Law University. Welcome to the Print soft cover, both of you. So today we are here to discuss their book, The Punished, Stories of Death Row Prisoners in India, which is based on the work of Project 39A. The work has been done by Anup, and Janvi has put it in beautifully descriptive details of how Anup interviewed these prisoners who were on death row. So we are just going to launch the book, which I have here packed in a really pretty pink cover, and I'm just going to unveil it. So here is the book. It's called The Punished: Stories of Death Row Prisoners in India. It's again based on the work done by Project 39A, written by Jahnavi Misra, and it's a HarperCollins release. So welcome both of you, and many congratulations for the release of this very interesting and very differently written book. So first of all, I just ask you about the Project 39A, because that's what catches your eye, because it's right there on the cover, Project 39A. So if you could just tell us a little bit about this project, what is it?
Yeah. Thanks, Ananya. And of course, thanks to Janvi for so powerfully and beautifully converting our work into what you see in your hands today. So really, it's really a dream come true for us to take these stories of prisoners that we interviewed between 2013 and 2016 and to see it like this. And Project 39A is a criminal justice program at National Law University, Delhi. It's a combination of researching on different issues of criminal justice like forensics, mental health and criminal justice, torture, legal aid. But also a big part of our work is also researching on the death penalty and also representing prisoners on death row. So based on this research that we did, after that, the work that we built up on that was that after seeing all that we saw, we felt that we had to do something for these prisoners. And since then, we have been representing prisoners on death row. We have been supported very generously by some of India's leading lawyers in the Supreme Court to represent these cases and also in the High Court. So that's what we do, basically.
So if I can ask both of you that, tell me something about this book which summarizes it. What was the idea behind the book, and especially your experiences while, Janvi, when you were putting it all together, and when you were interviewing these convicts?
Yeah, well, for me, it was quite challenging when I was given the interview transcripts to kind of begin, because it was hard for me to dissociate the criminals from the crimes that they had committed, to kind of see them as human beings who had stories to tell before and after the moment of the crime. But once I kind of pushed aside that first reaction, that immediate reaction of loathing, that's when I began to understand better. That's when I could imaginatively walk in their shoes. And that was my process. In terms of the book, it is, of course, based on the death row convicts, their real lives, but it kind of presents a range of perspectives, not just the stories, not just the convicts, but their family members in some stories, even third-party observers, like researchers and journalists in other stories. The agenda behind it, the book, is to humanize the convicts, to show them as human beings with multiple dimensions, who are rooted in society, who do not exist in vacuums, like demons or monsters, or nothing
Right.
to kind of do with regular social life. The aim is to present their side of the story.
Right. Anup, your experiences interviewing so many of them, because as I said in the starting of our discussion, that we look at criminals in a way that we are terrified of them. So I also get that a lot, that you cover crime, you must be meeting a lot of criminals, and how do you deal with it? But
Yeah.
nobody really understands that they're also human beings at the end of
Yeah.
the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think first of all, I must acknowledge that the project is the result of the efforts of so many people, right? Of course, I headed the project, but there were a few others who also interviewed death row prisoners. It's just not possible for one person to do
Right.
this kind of breadth. And also, my wonderful students who fanned across the breadth of the country, tracking down families
Right.
and meeting them. So yes, it was a very satisfying collective effort at the university. In
Right.
terms of experience of interviewing death row prisoners, I think, as I've written in the introductory note, I don't think anything could have prepared me for it. I mean, despite all
Right.
the intellectual training and academic training on thinking about fundamental rights and how prisons are and all of that, just the sheer human experience of listening, as Janvi was saying, these different perspectives that it's that very often we think of these people just being defined by their crimes. That's all we
Right.
know about them. We don't know anything else, right? And
Right.
when you start hearing those stories, and all of this is not an exercise to justify what they did, right? It is to
Right.
say that
Not at all.
these are very complex situations. These are complex
Right.
people. These are emotional
Right.
people, right? Just like, I guess, you and me, and but except people who find themselves in extraordinary situations, right? So I think just that complexity and intensity is something that I don't think I was ready for.
Right.
And I think that burden of expectation whenever you are talking to them, that you will help them. And but as a researcher, to maintain that ethic and say, no, you're not there to help, was quite challenging
Right.
most of the
In,
time.
in fact, in your introductory note only, you've mentioned that you felt that the system dehumanizes the person before executing him or her.
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Because I think uh, the kind of perspectives that Janvi has brought out, right, to know the person, and I think the law and the system does a function of not showing you the person, right, not hearing that person. All that you see is this. You don't have an image, you don't know the person, you're not hearing the person, you're not seeing the person. All that you have is that this person did this horrific thing, and that's all
Right.
you associate this person with, and that's all that person
Right.
is reduced to. And therefore then it becomes easy to just hate that person because that's the only thing you know.
Right. So, Janti, while writing the book and reading the transcripts, you must have gotten a peek into what these death convicts on death row are really thinking. I mean, is there a feeling of fear in them, or is it just helplessness, or is it anger? What is it? I mean, what do you think goes on to them into their minds really? And plus, it's also a very harrowing procedure, because we saw one very recently, this December 16 gang rape. There were so many times when they were saying that the procedure that you have to file like a petition, and then it comes back, then there's the last resort, then you move another court. So the entire procedure in itself is so harrowing that a person sitting in the cell at night knows that he's going to die, but this procedure is just delaying that death. So what really goes into the mind of that person?
Yeah, according to the interviews that I read, the one emotion that stood out more than anything else was a deep sense of despair and disgruntlement with the system.
Yeah.
I think none of the prisoners that I read about felt adequately represented
Yeah.
by the lawyers assigned to them. Um, there was a deep sense of dissatisfaction and despair. That was the major feeling that came across, and helplessness because of that. Also, the expense that their families have to,
Yeah.
go through, because they're all, I mean, from impoverished backgrounds, and how expensive it is for the families to come and see them. All that just added to that terrible situation. Yeah.
So if you could just explain a little about their families. I mean, for a family, for a father, even if that son has committed rape or has committed murder, it's his son at the end of the day, and they would always feel that he's innocent or probably, did it in a fit of rage. So what about the family members who go through this thing that they probably know that they're going to lose him, that, on a death row, till when can they really save him? But then, in fact, that sheer helplessness shows more in your writing about when you talk about their families. So if you could just elaborate a little on that.
Yeah, from what I gleaned from the interviews, the first, I mean, there are stages in which people react to these things, isn't it? I think the first stage is that of denial, a certain sense of denial and anger towards the system. And then it very quickly actually devolves into this kind of despair and helplessness where you know that you can't do anything. So eventually what it ends up as is a forced sense of almost, in certain cases, I definitely saw a sense of wanting to forget that you even had a son, you even had somebody who is now languishing in death row. And that is the greatest, I mean, that was deeply disturbing for me to read and to process.
In one of the chapters, Anup, I read how the police is accused of planting evidence, and it happens in a lot of cases that we see that to create evidence and to make sure that the charge sheet is watertight, a lot of things are done. But at the end of the day, the court needs evidence. It really does. No matter what the accused says, it's the evidence that matters at the end of the day. So if the judge cannot really look at other things, or emotions don't play much of a role in here. So how bridge that gap? I mean, I really don't understand. It's a situation that I think 80% of these people who are arrested face, that probably they don't have good representation. The lawyers are not as good. So how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah. So as Ananya, somebody as since you also work with crime and report on crime, you will understand that the most amount of damage is done in the first few hours or the first few days, right? And that's when you need the best representation, right? And also during the trial. Unfortunately, the system is such that that's where you get the worst representation, right? Because of course all of them are extremely poor. They can't afford good representation. They're also scared of going to the legal aid system, so they go and pay whatever little they can to private lawyers who don't do a good job. So therefore, the opportunity to challenge these kind of investigative malpractices or prosecutorial malpractices is lost very early on. And later on, in the appellate stage, let's say in the Supreme Court or anything, there's very little you can do once, as you said, the evidence is recorded, is decided upon, right, is presented in a certain manner in the judgments. There's very little you can do, and that's perhaps is the tragedy of the situation, right? And the statistical truth of this is, for every 100 death sentences that have been handed out in the last 20 years, about 35% of them have resulted in acquittals later. So it shows you how what is happening in the system.
Like in a case of rape, there was one instance, this case of Meeta I was reading in the book. The sentiment is actually against the accused right from the beginning in a case of rape where there's rape murder involved. So now the question brings that how does it really affect the trial? How does it really affect the trial in a way that the media also is showing all of those things and there's so much pressure otherwise? So how should a trial be, should remain unaffected by all this? Does it really affect the trial, all these media stories and other sentiment, the public sentiment that's on against an accused of rape?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to think about why is there that reaction to sexual violence, and I think why is there that social reaction to sexual violence, and I think that reaction is very often an expression of helplessness, of our collective helplessness to effectively address sexual violence in our society. I think we're all shocked, aghast. We feel a sense of helplessness about it. And I think then that moment it becomes convenient for society to channel all that social failure and social hate towards that one person. And very often we don't have confidence in our police, but suddenly in these circumstances we are happy to go with who they are pointing out and saying these people are responsible, and we are happy to accept their word, right? And we
Right.
saw that in Hyderabad and the celebration around
Absolutely.
the
I was coming to
extrajudicial,
that.
the
Yes.
extrajudicial execution of that. Yeah, I mean, and then as Janvi has also written in the stories, I mean that social reaction to it. It's difficult for everyone involved in the legal process to just get divorced from it. It's not like a switch that you just turn on and off, right? It's not.
Right.
This is a very important issue, actually, because in the interviews that I was reading, the accused were particularly disgruntled by the fact that they were portrayed in a certain way by media. A lot of
Right.
them felt doomed from the beginning
Yeah.
because of how they were being perceived, because of the reporting on them. So yeah, that is a very important issue.
So
How
do you
media
think
reported.
do you think it needs to be dealt with more sensitively when it comes to even reporting about accused in a case, whether it is rape, murder, anything?
Absolutely. I think any widely circulated opinion that's kind of based on fear or a need for revenge distorts perception. So yeah, definitely, media needs to be sensitive, needs to have a more balanced way of reporting these crimes, and kind of keep in mind both the victim, of course, but also the accused.
Right.
Um,
Right. So legally speaking, both of you, the question is for both of you that in many cases we withhold the names of victims, right? Then why is it not happening for accused? Because
yeah,
an also is equally innocent till proven guilty. Then why not withhold names of accused in these matters?
yeah, it's unjustified, I think.
Yeah. No, it's a system that's stacked. As much as we say that it's innocence until proven guilty,
Yeah.
in the actual working of the system,
No,
it is
of course
stacked.
not.
It's stacked against the accused, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's the reality of it. And I think there is a great need for very honest conversation around sexual violence in society,
Right.
right? And this kind of demonizing of offenders is not
Yeah.
going to take us very far. Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't resolve anything in the end unless you address the root causes of a crime. Killing off a criminal or demonizing a criminal, one particular criminal, doesn't really resolve anything.
Right.
Mm.
One thing, Janvi, I wanted to ask you how seriously you must have, I mean, you have written, or I mean, you've read these interviews, you've written this excellent book. How seriously is counseling taken in prisons? Because once a person has committed crime, and most of these cases, these are people not who are hardcore criminals. These are the ones who have either committed a crime in a fit of rage, or it's the first time, or all those. So how important is counseling? Because I was reading that chapter on that madman, that
Yes,
Prashant fellow who rams a bus into a
yes,
number of people because he hasn't gotten leave, and he's just angry, he's frustrated. So
yes.
how important and how seriously it is taken in prisons, because I don't think that it is given much importance.
No, not at all. As you read in the story, as I try to convey in that story, and in a few other places in the book as well, none of these facilities are really provided to the prisoners. Mental health, far from it.
Right.
Um, but even like basic necessities, they have to struggle for. So yeah, no, they desperately need, a lot of them desperately need. These crimes are of that nature as well, where that the one committing it probably
Right.
does need some amount of counseling, some amount of mental health, somebody to address their mental health. But no, that is not, that doesn't seem to be available to them at all.
Yeah.
Far
Anand,
Yeah.
from
So
your views on that?
yeah, and Ananya, I think we very often hear that prisons are for reformation and
Yeah, exactly.
rehabilitation and all of these things.
Right.
But as Janvi was saying, the realities of these institutions are that these are very dark places,
Right.
right?
Right.
These are places where we put people behind those walls and forget about them. And
Right.
that's, if you look at, and they're very opaque spaces. There's there's hardly any access to them.
Right.
And once you go into these, and having gone into prisons all across the country, there are no spaces for reformation and rehabilitation, right? There is
Absolutely.
no sufficient budget allocation or any real sense of rehabilitation happening there, right?
Right.
And it is just furthering that kind of suffering, right? And as again Janvi said, let alone mental health facilities, even the most basic
Basic
necessities of
one.
hygiene or food or nutrition is just itself not taken care of, right? So, in that sense, the mental health concerns are further exacerbated inside prisons.
In fact, we have seen in many cases wherein people go to jail in young age, they get inducted in gangs inside the prison, and they come out as criminals, even though they go in for like a petty crime, even if it is theft or anything, even destruction of some sort of pole, electric pole. Because I remember these cases when I was reading, those cases were rushing through my head, wherein we've seen that what conditions they stay inside jail. So, if Anup, if you could just give us a peek into what jail life is like, and how important are jail reforms?
Yeah, I think there just need to be a holistic view of what is wrong with our prisons. It's I think very often the treatment and the facilities and the budgetary expenditure. What are we spending it on? How are we spending it on? Are we spending enough? Are all very important questions. Uh, but I think there is also the question of the pressure on prison administration, on prison guards, right, on prison officials. We need to focus on that aspect as well. Why is there so much violence inside prison? Right? What
Right.
are the conditions under which prison officials are serving? So both sides of the story need to be looked at, right? And also, the truth of the matter is, we are sending so many people inside prison as under trials, right?
Right.
And we are very often people go there as under trials, don't get convicted,
Right.
spend a lot of time before they come out, right? And that's kind of over criminalization and over incarceration
Right.
are very serious issues as well.
So how does this delay in trial really affect inmates? Like waiting for your turn to go to the court, and then there'll be a next date after months. So
Yeah.
languishing in jail for years, and then not sufficient, as you said, legal representation. So
Yeah.
how does it affect the
Yeah, I mean it's a complex picture really, right? I mean, like in some of the stories, there is an abandonment from the family in certain
right,
instances, right? They
right,
don't want them back, or they don't want anything to do with them because their society, the social reality is that their immediate contexts are telling them that if you have anything to do with this prisoner, we will not
right,
let you live in our midst, right? So it's a very complex set of what support structures are there, not there, right? And very often it puts people into very dark places, right?
right,
And especially if you're on death row and once you've been sentenced to death, I think just that the cruelty of the death penalty in that sense is. I mean, very often we think that the cruelty is in the moment of taking life, right? And I think I realized through the interviews that the cruelty perhaps doesn't lie there. It is in that daily
absolutely.
uh, uncertainty about whether you're going to live or die, and constantly living with that uncertainty. That's what truly makes the death penalty barbaric. Yeah.
Right. So, Janti, while writing the book, did it actually give you a peek into a convict's mind? Because you have written about how one is feeling very helpless, one is wanting to escape, he also wants to escape from the prison, uh, also makes an attempt, then somebody wants to kill himself because he just wants to escape that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, reading the interviews gave me a lot of insight into the prisoners' minds. Also, their silences and pauses and their hesitations in the
Yeah.
interviews. That's where the characters developed from those kinds of pauses and silences.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was difficult and very challenging, but a rewarding process for me.
Right, great. Anup, talking about legal representation again, I mean, where do you think our system lacks? When will it be? How far are we from the place where people will actually be able to get good legal representation at minimal cost?
I mean, uh, that's a difficult question. That's almost like asking me when will we have equality in society, right? And it's as likely or as unlikely as answering that, right?
Right,
And I think all of these injustices and inequalities that we see in the criminal justice system are indeed reflective of larger structural inequalities, right? And
right,
unless we really address those, there is no magic fix
Right.
to the criminal justice system.
Right. So, this question of death penalty, I mean, this topic is talked about whenever there is a death row which is pending. People talk about why death penalty should be abolished, how it is so cruel. Some argue that, it acts as a deterrent, and people at least would. Uh, the criminals would know that in case if we do something, then probably we can be next to the gallows someday, so that'll act as a deterrent. But clearly it doesn't act as a deterrent. So this question is to both of you, because since you've worked on these interviews, Janvi, you have written the book, and Anup, you have interviewed so many of these death convicts. What are your views on death penalty?
Should I go first?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Janvi,
sure.
please.
So yeah, I think death penalty the world over needs to be reevaluated, but specifically in the Indian context. The death penalty India report informs us that over 74% of death row inmates are from impoverished backgrounds. We need to consider why that is. And when you couple that with the fact that our expensive and complicated judicial system is inaccessible to those very people that it chooses to punish in such extreme ways, you begin to see the big problem with the system. So yeah, for me, yes, the death penalty, that belongs to the arena of revenge and retribution, I think,
Right.
has no place in a just and humane society. Having said that, the book itself, I have taken great care that the book remains neutral.
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
not
I was
trying
about
to
to say that.
I'm not trying to hammer a point in the book. I'm not trying to sway the reader in any one direction.
Right.
Yeah.
Anup.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with Janvi there, and I think in that conversation on the death penalty, I think there are different stages that we need to go through before we get to that stage of, oh, is the death penalty, should it be abolished or retained? And I think the kind of effort that that the book does, and what is so beautifully done by Janvi in terms of presenting them as people, right?
Right. Right.
That this is not just about an abstract issue. This is not an abstract political debate, right? This is about real people, real lives, real stories. And I think as a society, that's what we need to do first. And that
Right.
in many ways uh, is the best thing that we can do for the death penalty conversation. And then
Right.
and that's why we're just so incredibly thankful to Janvi for doing it so beautifully and powerfully in the book, right?
It was a
That we
very
as
rewarding
academics
experience.
can't do, we as researchers can't do, right?
That's what writers do.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah.
Right. So, last question to both of you. What are your takeaways from the book? Janvi, you can go first.
Um, I mean, it was eye-opening for me, and I hope it would be equally eye-opening for the reader. Um, um, I hope the reader will be able to open themselves up to experiences that otherwise would seem so alien and so remote through these stories. So yeah, I hope uh, I hope I have succeeded in humanizing these convicts who otherwise are kind of looked on as demons and monsters. And if I have done that, I would consider myself successful.
Yeah.
Anup, your takeaway from
Yeah.
interviewing so many of these convicts on death row, and what have they taught you?
Right. And my takeaway would be that if more people could hear more of these prisoners and see them, right? And I know it's not possible and the system would never allow that. But just if you were to hear them and see them and understand their life stories and how they live their lives and how they came to this situation in their lives, I think we would be having a very different social conversation about the death penalty. And I think this is a small effort from Janvi and our part to bring
Yes.
people as close as possible to that experience.
Right. Thank you so much, both of you. And once again, I'd just like to show the book, The Punished. It's by HarperCollins. Jahnavi Misra has written it. The interviews have been conducted by Anup Surendranath. Thank you so much, both of you, joining us here. It's an excellent read, Janvi. It actually opens up your mind to how even criminals are human beings, and what goes actually into the mind of these death convicts who are waiting for death. It really gives a very, very different perspective on criminals. So thank you so much, both of you, joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much.